Hey peeps, this is Ferny, your resident psychic medium and spiritual teacher, and you're listening to Ferny Unfiltered, where we dive into topics that enlighten, inform, and entertain the soul. On today's episode, we're discussing how Starbucks made me a better human being and a spiritual teacher. So stick around because you won't want to miss it. So, how did Starbucks make me a better human being and a spiritual teacher? Every time I think of this, it takes me back to this moment where I had an experience with one of my exes, and we were at this it's a Greek restaurant, and we were just like leaving the restaurant, and I had mentioned to him that I felt as if it was my responsibility or it was something that I was supposed to do in life, where I was supposed to help to inform, enlighten, to give information, to kind of inspire and empower people to take more responsibility for themselves, for their spiritual beliefs, for their ideas, and less about kind of leaning or relying on religion or relying on some sort of religious practice, religious belief for all their answers. I think growing up as a Catholic, you always turn to the church for answers. And I remember back when I was a kid, I remember asking one of the teachers in catechism, which is like Catholic school, about Noah's Ark and how all the animals could fit in the boat if there's supposed to be two of each animal that existed. And there are millions, if not billions, of animal species on the planet. And how could you fit all of those into one ship, one vessel? And she said to me that, well, we don't really question how it happened. I think with God's will, it was able to be possible. And that wasn't a good enough answer for me. So I think me questioning what I was taught, what I was conditioned to believe, started off at a very early age. And as I got older and older and older, I felt as if people had become slaves to their belief system. People had become sheep, where they were just blindly following the teachings of their parents, their society, their culture, their religion, because that's what they were trained to do. That's what they were conditioned to do. And so they never really questioned it. They didn't, and if they did question it, they didn't talk about it. And I felt it was my responsibility to kind of like peel back the mask and show like what's behind the curtain, peel back the layers of conditioning and give people a chance to like have real power over their lives, to have a real relationship with God, not just the structured restricted relationship that we are mostly taught through religion, but just to have a better, more profound connection. So I remember telling him, I feel it's my responsibility to inspire people, to teach people, to give them everything that I'm learning or I've learned myself, because it has transformed my life. It has changed me as a person. And he was like, well, how are you ever going to get to that place? Like, how are you ever going to become like a spiritual teacher? You're not even comfortable talking to people. You're not even comfortable being in leadership positions. So I was like, I don't know. I really don't know how that's going to come about. I just know that it's a plan. It's something that I feel called to do, that I feel like it is something I'm meant to do in life. And I felt this way since I was a kid, since I began to read and learn about things that, we weren't supposed to know about, reading books, etc. So I think that conversation with my ex really got me on board with wanting to transform and to change and to become this person that could connect with people, that could reach out to as many people as I could connect with, as many people as I could reach, to give them what I possess, to give them what I had learned and what I have come to understand. So, and that, so for me, it was a bit of a struggle, because I wasn't the most I wasn't the most open person, the most social person. I'm still not. I mean, I'm pretty antisocial in a way. I feel like I think I remember RuPaul giving an interview, and she said she's an introverted extrovert. No, she's an extroverted introvert. She's an extrovert masking themselves as one, but they're actually introverted. So that's me. Mostly keep to myself. I'm not as much of a social person. I really don't desire to go out and be in front of large groups of people and to communicate and to socialize and to chit chat. I'm not that kind of person naturally, and it has taken a long time to even get to the point where I can hold a conversation in a social environment, or to even do this, what I'm doing right now, communicating with you guys, talking to you, looking at a camera, not feeling scared or not feeling worried about how I was going to look, how I was going to be. I think I've gotten enough experience over the last 10 years that have really more than that, actually I would say more like 15 years, that have really transformed me as a person to be able to do this work, to be able to have a podcast, to be able to share what I know without feeling like I wasn't good enough, or like I wasn't doing what I was wanting to do. So it's taken a long time to change and transform in that way. But I was always a shy kid. I was always the quiet little guy in school. I kept to myself. Sometimes I would mingle and mix with other people if I had friends. But in elementary school, I would sit with all the girls because the boys didn't want to be friends with me. And so the girls, they just put up with me, even though I don't think they wanted me to sit with them either. They just put up with me. I remember having cousins who would spend time with me in school because they felt sorry for me because I didn't have a lot of friends, or people just didn't want to spend time around me. So it was a struggle growing up and being that odd kid that doesn't really connect on a basic level with other people. And growing up, I was very sheltered. My mom, for a long time, was more, it was just me and her. And so she sheltered me from a lot of things. And I never really learned social skills growing up. I remember when I was like in my teens, we lived in this house that had a yard, and then there was a gate around the yard. And I remember neighbors coming to say hi, or just wanting to spend time with me, or wanting to see if I wanted to play with them. And I was so shy, I wouldn't even go out and like talk to them at the fence. I would yell through the screen in the window because I felt like the screen was protecting me or keeping me from being exposed. So I always like had this buffer between me and people. I think I still do to some extent. I think I always keep this boundary, this like buffer, because I just sometimes it's not the easiest thing for me to do. I'm a lot better at it today than I was back then. But I just was so shy. I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know, like, why do they want to talk to me? Why do they want to spend time with me? I didn't get it. I did not get it at all. And then, of course, you include the bullying and all that. And then that really does a number on you, because not only are you struggling because you are having trouble communicating with people, and you're having, a difficult time connecting and being accepted by people, but then you get the kids who start bullying you and picking on you. Then it really makes you want to just kind of disconnect and disassociate from what is normal for children in that age range, or in that time frame. So I think that the period in my life where I really started to change and transform was when I started working for Starbucks. Before that, I had had a few jobs. I was a telemarketer for a few months one time, and then I also was a receptionist for a community center in our neighborhood, in our Hispanic community. So I did a few like random jobs here and there, but I think the one that really just caused me to transform and change the most was the Starbucks job. And it all started, I'd never even heard, like I didn't even know what Starbucks was. I think I'd maybe heard about it, but it wasn't something on my radar. Again, I lived on the poor side of town. We didn't have Starbucks on the poor side of town. We just had, no one even thought of like, oh, you go and pay for coffee. Like you can make coffee at home. Why would you go and pay for something like that? So the whole Starbucks culture, that whole cafe culture didn't really exist for me. And I remember this was like in my later teens. So I think I was like 16 or 17. And there was a guy who wanted to go on a date. He was significantly older, interestingly enough, but he lived on the other side of town. He lived in the River Oaks area of Houston, which is the nicer area of Houston. So he picked me up at my house, at our apartment. He picked me up, and we drove over to the Starbucks in the River Oaks area, in the corner of West Grand Shepherd. That was like my first Starbucks, a drive-through one. That was my very first gig, my first Starbucks. And I walked in there not knowing what to expect. I was a little intimidated just going into an environment like that because I didn't know what to expect. To this day, when I'm going into an environment or into a situation that I do not know about, it makes me very anxious. It makes me very nervous. My best friend Carla, she's almost the same way. So whenever I'm going to do something new or go into a place that's new for me, I have to do reconnaissance. I have to do like a background check and look and see what it looks like online, see how people are interacting with each other. I try to have a feeling of what it's going to be like before I actually go into the environment, because it makes it easier for me to walk in and feel completely natural and comfortable. So, and this was in the earlier days of the internet. So the internet was still somewhat new, and it was just starting to become a norm. I mean, this was like back in the AOL days when you get in the AOL chat rooms and you talk to people. So I met this guy, and he picked me up. We went over to the Starbucks. And we sat there and we were having some coffee. Back then, I didn't really care for coffee because I didn't like coffee. I got a mocha, I think, or a hot chocolate, one or the other. And I just sat there. And aside from us just chatting amongst ourselves, I was really paying attention to the environment and how people were just hanging out, doing their own thing, chatting with each other. It felt like a pretty comfortable environment. And then what really got my attention were the people behind the counter, where they were just having fun and having a good time and joking around with each other and laughing, etc. And I really got a kick from watching the people just doing their jobs, but also having a good time and enjoying each other's company. And it felt like an amazing place to work at. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to work here. I think I want to do this, or just to be here. I think this would be great for me, because if I'm going to go and grow and evolve spiritually, then I think this experience, this is going to help me. And I think this is going to help me learn how to connect with people, how to communicate with people, and how to just, bond in a way that I am unable to at this time, and relate to others in a way. So I had an immediate desire to want to work there. And after the date was a disgrace. It turned out to be a really awful date experience. But after that, I decided I was going to work at Starbucks. So I started filling out applications. I printed them out, and I took them to like 7 or 8 different Starbucks in downtown, because back then I rode the bus. I didn't have a car. So I took the bus, went into downtown, and I just went to as many Starbucks as I could, and I just left my application and introduced myself, and that's it. So a few weeks went by, and didn't hear anything. Didn't really think that maybe I was gonna even get called or anything like that. And then I got a call, and it was a woman from Starbucks, and she just so happened to be from the Starbucks that I had the date on, which is funny because I didn't even leave my application there. Just going into that area, going into the River Oaks area, was a little intimidating for me. So for me to get on the bus and go out there, I wasn't going to do that. But downtown was easy because I spent many a years going to downtown with my mom and going to Woolworths and having going and eating at some of the restaurants there when we used to have our date days with mom. So I was much more comfortable going to downtown. I wasn't really comfortable going to the River Oaks area. So I was surprised that they had my application, and I was surprised that they were calling me because that's not where I applied to. And it turns out that they didn't get enough people applying to their store, so they went to the other stores in downtown and got applications, and that's how they got mine. So coincidental. People call it coincidental. I call it law of attraction. I desire to work here at this specific store, and then I applied at a Starbucks, and somehow my application lined up with where I wanted to work at. So that was pretty cool. That was one of my first real experiences, like having a law of attraction experience or a manifestation experience. So I went in for the interview, and I met with the assistant manager and another supervisor, and we sat down, had a great interview. It was more of a conversation than it was an interview, and I felt so accepted right off the bat, and I felt so on a friend level with these people, and that was really nice. I didn't feel intimidated by them at all. And then they called me back a few days later and wanted me to go in for a second interview. And it turned out the second interview wasn't an interview. It was actually me going in, being hired, and filling out paperwork. So that's what it turned into. So I was super excited, super happy. And that was when I joined Starbucks. And this was like in the 2000s. This was in the early 2000s. So this was quite a while ago. But I think that's when it all started, when I started to change. And just not only was it easy to be myself as Ferny, but also it was just easy to be myself as a gay man. Up to that point, I didn't ever really feel comfortable enough to be myself, especially on my side of town. And in the Hispanic community, it just wasn't an easy thing to just be yourself and be a gay person in that community. And it took a long time for me to kind of accept that within myself, let alone make myself comfortable with being around my family members, my friends, etc., and being openly gay. So for me to work at Starbucks and for me to be able to do that was amazing, and it was life transforming. So that's when I started to accept myself as a gay man and as me as Ferny, and I began to learn how to connect and communicate with people. I remember the first time I was supposed to ring someone up. They're like, "Okay, you ready to ring your first person up?" I'm like, "Ring someone up? Like I have to talk to people?" I wanted to just work behind the scenes or work at the bar or something. They're like, "No, you gotta talk to people." So it kind of pushed me into an uncomfortable place, but I think it served me nonetheless. So I think Starbucks was an amazing experience to help me evolve and grow in that way. And it really helped me to have a safe space for being Ferny, for being myself. And I'll tell you more about what came from that when we come back. So, Starbucks was a great place for me to accept myself, and it was a safe space. And I spent, I think, in that store, I think I was there for about 3 years. But I got so comfortable being me, and people thought I was actually funny, which I never thought of myself as a funny person. Although, in retrospect, when I look back at old behaviors and old videos of myself, I'm like, well, I was kind of a funny little guy, but I didn't think of myself as a funny person. And I just was myself, I was me. And so I got to know a lot of people from different social backgrounds. I mean, the River Oaks area is a ritzy area, so there's a lot of people who have old money there. So you interact with a lot of those kinds of people, but then you also interact with people who work in the area and they're just driving through. You've also got you had the Channel 11 news station down the road, so they would come through as well. So you interacted with a lot of people who were from different walks of life, and a lot of them were from these backgrounds where they were successful professionals or they were well known in their communities, etc. So I didn't when someone would come up and order a coffee, I didn't see their background. I didn't see, the money or the position or any of that. I just saw like a customer who wanted to order a coffee, and that's all it was. And so it helped me to get comfortable fairly quickly with people from different social backgrounds. Not only that, but in Starbucks, they really promote that you have chit chat with people. Back then, I don't know what it's like today, but back then, talk to people, get to know people, be friends with your client, with their customers. That's okay. Like it's okay to connect with people on that level. And I did. I totally threw myself into that. And I there were a lot of customers that would come in, and I loved them, absolutely loved connecting with them and having conversations with them and being able to just share and connect with life and all of that. So, and because I was still a young kid, most of them were adults or young professionals. So it helped me to maybe look at my life and look at the potential of my life in a very different way. Because if it was possible for some of these, peeps, it was possible for me. If you grow up in the hood, your dreams are sometimes limited to your environment because you don't really see past your environment. And in school, everybody had dreams, everybody had goals, everybody wanted to be something. But how were you going to achieve that, and were you going to be able to achieve that? Because you're from the hood, and it's not like it's an easy thing to just decide you want to go to college and then go. You have to go and get some sort of funding for that. You have to go and qualify for a loan, or you have to go and get some sort of grant that will help you get through school. So it really forced me to think of life and the potentials that were possible for me in a very different way. And I think that the period where I think I changed the most was when I started to develop into leadership positions, where I didn't think of myself as someone who would be responsible or someone who could be in control of other people or of an organization or an operation. So when I became a shift supervisor, it was just a very transformative experience because it put me in a position where I had the final say, or I had to make a decision that would affect other people. And it took years for me to get comfortable with that. And I was a ship supervisor for several years before I became a store manager. But it forced me to trust myself and to have faith in myself to do whatever I needed to do to make things work. And that took some time, because that, if you grew up and you are a shy person, you're not a very social person, and then you're bullied on top of that, it does a number on your self-esteem. It does a number on your sense of worth and value. So when you're put in positions where you're having to make decisions and make the call, and people are going to scrutinize you, they're going to criticize you, you have to find your footing. You have to find a sense of, you know what, I can do this, and this is my decision, this is what I'm saying. You either take it or leave it, but this is my call. It's my choice, and I'm the final say in this. So it allowed me to get really comfortable with that sense of power. But with anything with power, it's easy for that to become affected by ego, because once you get the ability to have control, to have power, your immediate reaction, your immediate response many times with someone who hasn't had it ever is to really like throw yourself into it and sometimes even abuse it. So I had to find a balance between being an effective leader, but also not taking advantage of other people because I was in a position to do so. And it was a trial and error period for me. So I had to learn about valuing other people and who they were and what they were for not only the organization, but for me as well. If you mistreated someone over time, they were probably going to quit, or they were going to stop showing up to work when you were supposed to be off the clock at a certain time. So everything that you decided, everything that you did had a consequence. And if you were not an effective leader, if you were not someone who respected other people, and you just took advantage of others, then you were going to pay the price at some point. So that taught me a lot of balance, and it took a while, but it really did get me to a place where I appreciated the ability to call a shot and to say this or that, but at the same time respect the individual that is helping me to achieve my goal as a leader. So it took a while for me to kind of step into that power and to find the balance in that way. I think today most people should be required to at least do some work in the service industry, even if it's like 1 year. Because when you're in the service industry, although there are a lot of plus sides, especially when I was working at Starbucks, and it was the earlier Starbucks culture, where there's more of a sense of acceptance and we're a family and we take care of each other, etc. But when you work in the service industry, you also, not only do you connect with people, but you also get to see the darker side of humanity. And people who were customers would come in, and because we were servers, we automatically were below them, or we automatically were on the level of it's almost like you take us back to the 1700s, 1800s, where you're a queen and we're all servants, and you don't really need to acknowledge us because we're nothing to you. So that's the mentality of some people who step into that environment. I'm the customer. I'm the one with power. I'm the one with control. I'm the one that says this or that or that or this, and you're gonna jump up when I snap my fingers. Some of the customers come in with that mentality. To this day, some people still come in with that kind of mentality because they feel so empowered that they can mistreat or they can abuse others, and they can just get people to do what they need them to do or want them to do. So you have to learn a nice little balance between not taking it personally sometimes, but at the same time, you have to stand your ground. And in those days, Starbucks really was about, if you feel disrespected or if you feel like someone is mistreating you, you don't have to stand for it. You don't have to stick around and accept that kind of behavior. You can turn them away. And it was very empowering to be in a position where you could turn a customer away because they didn't treat you well. And those were my first experiences in really learning to stand my ground and to be strong and to, honor myself as a person and realize that I didn't have to put up with misbehavior or with maltreatment from other people. But I think it taught me humanity. It taught me humility. It taught me how to connect with people on a human level, and not abuse the power that I had. And I think it's important for people to know that, because, we nowadays we're in the social media, generation where people are so disconnected from each other. They don't understand each other's lives, each other's situations. They don't even care to try to grasp what the other person is going through. And people always want to make judgments. They always want to assume many things about others, but it's not always the case. It's not always that way. And I think when you work in the service industry, you get to see people in a different way. And not only that, but it teaches you how to treat others with respect and dignity. To this day, like when I go to a Starbucks, I try to tip as much as I can, even if the service is sucky, because I know many a days where I wasn't my best at Starbucks and I was tired or I was struggling with something. I mean, I went to work when I had lost people, and they'd passed away, and I was just completely devastated, but I still showed up to work. And people were like, why aren't you smiling? Why aren't you being real peppy? Why aren't you being this way? Why aren't you? Like, people expected me to be 100% like on all the time, giving them everything they wanted, but they didn't realize that I had struggles as well, and I was going through something. So it taught me how to really just appreciate other people, period, regardless of where they are in their lives. So when I go to Starbucks now, I try to tip quite a bit, because I always appreciated people who came in, and regardless of whether they got good service or not, they were appreciative of the service. And I typically tip more than the drink itself. So if my drink is like $4, I'll tip like $5. And they're like, are you sure it's just a $4 drink? I'm like, yeah, I'm totally sure. Like, you guys are great. Even if they're not 100%, I still do that, because I want them to know that I get it and I understand where they're coming from. And also, as soon as you do that, they appreciate you and they see the value in you, that you're not just another customer, you're a human being who has a sense of deeper understanding and connection with them. So it really helps to shift the energy for the person, but also for yourself, because whenever you can give, if you're in a position to give, then give, because you're going to feel great about it. And it's also going to allow you to just appreciate, regardless of whether it was a perfect situation or you received something perfectly or not. So I think that it's important that people maybe have that experience, and early on. I think there's a lot of other things that people should have, like, automatically receive an education in, because it would help us be better human beings. And I'll talk to you more about that in just a moment. I think that working in the service industry teaches you a lot about being human and a lot about connecting with other people in a very authentic way. And you also get a chance to see people not at their best. I remember one incident where a woman just did not get her order correctly. So she didn't complain. She didn't say anything about it. But the next time she came in, she just decided to blast whoever she was going to be ordering with, even if it wasn't the person that messed up her order. She was just going to blast whoever she was going to order with, because she felt empowered to do so. So I remember being called out by one of my partners, and back then Starbucks, we call the employees partners, because we're all partners in the business. But I went out to check on one of my employees because they were having difficulty with this customer. And I walked up to her and I said, how can I help you? I'm the manager. What can I do for you? And she wanted us to like go above and beyond and bend over backwards to like give her more than what she was deserving with her issue. In other words, if her drink was messed up, then we will give you your drink on us for free, and then we'll give you a coupon for your next order. She didn't want that. She wanted me to fire the person that had messed up her order on the spot. And I'm like, you aren't in a position to tell me who is going to work here or not. Your only power here is to tell me how you want your drink and for me to rectify that. That's it. So don't step beyond your power, because that is not within your jurisdiction. She wasn't having it, so she went off on me and she started to basically like personally attack me. She called me a fag. She says I was walking like a little girl when I was walking away, because she pissed me off so much. She had gotten me so upset because of how personally she was attacking me. And you could tell this person wasn't well. You can tell they were psychologically unstable, and she was just mouthing off and going off, and there was a line of people there, and there was a store full of people, and all my partners were there, etc. So as soon as she just started going off on me and just personally attacking me for being, and I was being very professional with her, I immediately I was like, I am going to react in an aggressive and violent way if I continue to subject myself to her voice and to what she is saying. So I wasn't having it. I just decided to step away, walk away, and she still kept attacking me, like, loudly. She's like, look at him, look how he's walking. He's walking like a little girl. He's not even a real man. Like, she was totally coming for me. Today, if that happened, I would probably deal with it in a very different way, just because I have more of a sense of, you know what, if you're going to come for me, I'm going to come for you right back at you, and I'm going to hit you just as hard, if not double hard. But back then, I was really trying to I was really trying to sustain my sense of dignity. And I was also trying to be an example for all the other partners, because I've always been saying to them, don't personally become aggressive with the client or with the customer. Try to gracefully bow out. But today is a different story. Today I'm like, nope, you come for me, bitch, I'm going to come for you twice as hard. But I didn't say anything. I literally just stopped communicating. I turned around and walked away, even as she was continuing to attack me. But I went into the back room, and I just sat there, and I was so angry and so upset, not only because I felt like I was humiliated in front of all these people, but she was coming at me in a way that reminded me of when I was being bullied in school, and people were calling me out and saying this or saying that about me, when they had no right to do so. So I took the rest of the day off. I literally said, you know what, guys, I'm going to put you in charge. I cannot be here for the rest of today. This is too much. And I'm not going to be able to bounce back from this, because this is really personal for me. So I put my next person in charge that could take charge, and I went home, and I just was upset, and I called my DM, and I was crying, and I was hurt. And so she even called corporate, and she totally twisted it around and said that I had aggressively attacked her, and was like, and they were trying to make it up to her, etc. I was just like, whatever. I just didn't care at that point. But it teaches you that sometimes people are just fucked up human beings, and if they feel that they're in a position where they're entitled to just cause you pain or cause you whatever they feel without any ramification, then they're going to do it. And I think that's what our social media community or culture has become, where you can just say whatever you want about somebody else, not realizing that they're a human being. This is almost like I was seeing the interview with Demi Lovato a couple of days ago, where she was talking about how people are going to say things, and sometimes I see it, and yes, it really does bother me, and I'm a human being, and I totally get it. And I try not to pay attention to the negative comments or the negative stuff that people will say, and people have said some really nasty things online, but I try to distance myself from that, because people are just ignorant, and they're stupid, and they just don't know any better. I blame either the parents, or I blame their culture, or I blame their environment that they grew up in, because I was taught not to be aggressive or to attack people that way, or to talk about people. If you don't have anything nice to say, then just keep your mouth shut. Now, that's not always acceptable either. Sometimes if you have a gripe, or if you have something that you need to share, or you need to criticize that is constructive, by all means, you need to say what you need to say. But coming for people and being personally attacking them, that's a no-no. And I was taught not to be that way. I was taught to respect and have respect for other people, period, regardless of whether you like them or not. So I try to avoid getting into any kind of confrontation or any kind of discussion of that nature online, because it's just not worth my energy. It's not worth my time. And I'm going to get really riled up, and then it's going to become a situation where my anger and my ego is going to step in, and I'm going to lose control of the situation. So I try to avoid that. But a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't have those boundaries. A lot of people don't have an awareness that they have such a huge impact on other people. Some people are just ill. They're not well people, and they don't have the ability to control their expression or how they're communicating. And I think it's up to us as human beings and as a culture of social media connectors to uphold a sense of standard about how we're going to communicate with each other. And I think now it's become so acceptable to just speak ill and violently and aggressively personally attack people, that now we're starting to really catch up to the repercussions of that in many instances. Look at the senator who was she was shot in the face, and then she bounced back. What is it, Gabby, I think her name is. So there are real repercussions for what people say and for how we egg each other on, sometimes by just being stupid and ignorant and not watching what we say. So it's important to understand that. And I think that's the reason why I think people should have to work in the service industry at some point in their lives, because it will teach them humility. It will teach them a basic human connection of compassion with other people by experiencing it from the other side. There's a few things I think we should automatically receive in school that we don't. I think every person in school should have a basic nursing course where they learn basic first aid skills, because I think the doctors and the nurses who really work hard have a lot on their plate. And I think a lot of issues can be resolved by people having basic first aid or basic nursing skills. So I think that would help a lot with the people so that they can focus on the cases or on the patients that really do need the help, and avoid wasting time with things that could be resolved at home or be resolved by people who have basic nursing skills. So I think basic medical nursing knowledge is a must, especially in today's day where most people can't even afford to go to the doctor. So it would be nice to be able to treat yourself or to have a sense of understanding about that. I think we should have classes in social consciousness. If we're going to live in a world where there are lots of other people from different walks of life, from different belief systems, etc., we should have courses in school that teach us how to live in that world. That doesn't mean you have to accept that person's belief system or to follow it yourself, but you still have to respect the fact that you live in a world where not everyone is the same. Not everyone is the same color, the same belief system, speaks the same language. We live in a diverse world, period. Doesn't matter what country you're from. We live in a diverse world, period. And so there should be a social consciousness class where we're aware of everybody and being acknowledgeable and understanding that we're going to have to deal with people from different walks of life. So we need to know how to respect and how to cooperate with each other. I think if we all had social consciousness classes from the get-go, all of this infighting that we're doing right now, all of this, one political party against another, one group of demographic people against another, all of that would probably not be as big of an issue if we were taught how to cooperate and work with each other in our differences. Another thing is critical thinking. I don't think that people think for themselves anymore. And even though most people come from a religious background, so they're either taught how to just follow and be conditioned to believe whatever is fed to you, and sometimes culturally as well. If people just were taught basic critical thinking skills, meaning that, don't just believe what you're told, question it, and try to understand. Because if you educate yourself, if you try to think about it and don't just accept, then I think, everybody's going to have an opinion, but we all will be better informed individuals living on a planet where, people just like to spout lies and just like to say whatever. And if you believe them, then you believe them. If I tell you a story, how are you really going to know whether it's true or not unless there's factual information that backs it up? So I think we should be taught critical thinking skills. And then of course, accountability. I don't think that we are taught enough accountability. I think as human beings, we are sometimes made to feel like we're not responsible for this or we're not responsible for that, or there's always a way out of being responsible for our actions. And I think that it's important that we learn accountability, that everything we do is going to have a consequence, whether positive or negative, but everything we do is going to have a consequence. Everything we think is going to have a consequence. Everything we say is going to have a consequence. So accountability courses, I think, are a must. It would help us really be better human beings and better citizens in the world, period. So there's a few things I think that we should learn as human beings that I think would help us nonetheless. So I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine who helped me really come out of my shell. And I'll tell you more about that in just a few moments. So I have this friend named Chelsea who passed away many, many years ago. And I remember she was a very free-spirited person, and she worked for me. She was one of my employees at Starbucks, and this was back when I was a store manager. And even though when I was at work, I was a very social person, I was a very interactive person, but I was also more focused on work and on being efficient and on making sure that the store was going to run really well. But I didn't always spend time outside of work with people. I didn't always socialize. And I remember she had moved down the street from me. This was on the East End. So this was on like in an area where it was a little cheaper. I had my house at the time, and I had this huge iron gate with spikes around my house. And she just wanted to spend time with me. She wanted to go and have fun and do stuff. And we shared a lot of spiritual philosophy together. I mean, we had a lot of similar beliefs. And she was very free spirited. So she was very open and honest. And she came from a religious background, but her spirituality was just far more developed for someone that age than myself. I mean, when I was her age, I didn't have half the knowledge that she possessed. So she was really someone that I was impressed by. And we would have these conversations, spiritual conversations, throughout, throughout the days at work sometimes. So the best conversations. And I remember she and her friend Erica, it was another friend of mine, they had moved down the street. And they used to walk by, my house when they would go to the grocery store. And I remember that she wanted to just say hi. And I think she was a little tipsy. I think they had some wine, but they just wanted to say hi, just come and say hi. So she stopped at my gate at my house, and they started yelling my name and trying to get me to to come out. I didn't hear anything. But then I started hearing a bunch of girls giggling and laughing. And I was like, what is that sound? What is it coming from? And Ed and we were in the bedroom watching TV. And I got up and I went over and I opened the because we had these shutters that opened as like a cafe style shutter. So we opened the shutters and I looked outside, and Ed looked outside as well. He immediately got mad because he was like, who are these bitches who are like, who are trying to, and basically they were trying to climb the gate. Chelsea was like, she was on the top of the gate where the spikes were at, and her friend Erica was trying to push her over, and they were laughing because she was trying to get over the top of it, even though it was like dangerous and she could hurt herself. And Ed, like, he didn't know who they were right away. He didn't recognize them. He was just like, oh my God, hey. And he's like knocking on the window, like, what are y'all doing? What are y'all doing? And as I opened the door, I immediately recognized who it was. I'm like, it's Chelsea. It's Chelsea. He's like, oh. And I went and opened the door and went outside, and she like jumped over, and she hurt her foot, but she jumped over, and I'm like, what the hell are you doing here? Like, what are you doing? And she's like, we want to see you. We want to see you. And I was like, okay. So I went and opened the gate, and Erica walked in, and I gave them hugs, and they came inside. And they were the first people. And this was before I was doing like in-person appointments. So I had only done appointments with people like in different like office buildings or in different locations. I'd never really done work from home. And I wasn't sure if I was comfortable having strangers in my home because I was pretty private when it came to being in my house. And they came in and they forced their way through my barriers, my boundaries, not only like physically, but also just emotionally and mentally. And they forced me to get comfortable with like people coming over and spending time in our home. And it forced me to start to like be more open and be more receptive to people and strangers. That was actually what triggered me to start having in-person appointments and having people coming over, because I wasn't comfortable with it at first. And so it was a huge shift for me, but she forced her way through my gate, my boundaries. And she forced me to open up in a way that I'd never opened up before. And after that, for a while, for many years, I did do in-person appointments until I switched everything over to online when I left Houston. But it was a huge transformative experience for me. And it taught me how to be more open and connected to people. And I think because of those types of experiences, I am now able to connect with people in a way that is more authentic and more real. So not only did Starbucks help to develop me into like a leader where I had to be there for other people in a way that I'd never been before, but I also was able to connect and to allow people into my life as well. Because I think I was always holding people back and not letting them in all the way. So I really appreciated the time that I spent at Starbucks, and I think that it transformed and turned me into the person that I am today. Regardless of my issues with the company, regardless of my issues with management and the issues that I ran into there, but I as a person changed. I transformed, and I became someone who can connect with you guys now and can talk to you and can tell you all the stuff that I know and all the stuff that I've learned about over the many years of my own spiritual practices and spiritual studies. So I am so grateful for that. So thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then like, share, and review my show on your podcast listening platform. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and check out my website at www.fernandomarone.com for additional content, updates, articles, and more. That's fernandomarone.com, FERNANDOMARRON.com. Till next time, kiddos, and be sure to have yourselves a namaste.